The current food industry is built for distribution. It's not built for consumption. So I've been to some of those gas chambers where they actually bring in tomatoes and strawberries and literally roll them on pallets into these gas chambers and gas them for 24 hours so they look pretty, and then they can take them to the grocery store. So if I were to make a prediction, I'd say by the end of this decade, every major city in the world is going to be surrounding themselves either inside the city or outside of the city with hydroponic farms. But that's what they want to do on the moon and Mars. Is we need to have self-sustaining systems. They have to be bioregenerative. We have to produce a lot of food. Nutrition is incredibly important, but if you're missing on vitamin D or something else, you can have other health-related issues. So they have to be able to grow those crops in space.
Welcome to Forging the Future, and we're here today with Federico Marques, the founder and CEO of a company called Moonflower Farms, which already has me interested. Moonflower Farms, what is that?
Moonflower Farms, we were the first indoor vertical farm in Texas. In 2016 we started, and my background was learning about hydroponics at NASA. So years ago, we said, hey, we're going to form a hydroponic company that helps NASA put flowers on the moon. And my NASA buddies were actually the ones who inspired that. So, but yeah, 2016 was the first indoor vertical farm. Then we were looking at hydroponics and how hydroponics can be used to solve a lot of these food desert issues and nutritional desert issues. But I know the future is going to be hydroponics. That's the bottom line. It was just a matter of how do we make the technology scale so every city by the end of this decade is surrounded by hydroponic farms. So that's what we do.
Why is that important? How does hydroponic farming solve anything?
Hydroponics solves a tremendous number of problems. I'll give you an example. You might only need 1/10 or 1/20 of the land. So 20 acres can be farmed on one. 90% less water. So instead of 1,000 gallons a day, I only need 100 gallons a day to produce the same amount of crops. Big problem right now is it's about 1,700 miles for most farms, like farm to table. In the US right now, the average is about 1,700 miles. But 60% of the population lives in the cities. So you have to become more sustainable. If you're growing it in the cities, you'll be able to access it a lot more, and you don't have to worry about transportation waste and food waste. But the biggest issue that came out very recently was nutrition security. When you have something that's grown far away and you harvest it and you have to bring it, on average, it loses about 10% of the nutrition value per day. So you could be eating oranges that have little to no vitamin C in them.
Why does that happen? I mean, just transportation.
Once you pick something once it's alive, it's filled with the full nutritional value that it has. But once you harvest it and package it, certain enzymes are produced and it starts to lose some of the nutrition. Minerals, fine. Fiber, fine. A lot of the valuable phytonutrients start to disappear. A lot of the vitamins start to disappear. And every day that it's in storage or in transit, you start losing more and more. So, but yeah, Oxford University just came out with a report, and Tufts University said, yeah, we have a huge $1 trillion a year problem with nutrition security in the U.S.
That's interesting, because I remember my family often would have a backyard farm. My dad liked to do that, and the vegetables and things that he would grow, the fruit, it did actually taste more, I don't know, vibrant or something, green beans picked right off, would taste sweeter than you would normally think, and so I can get, so basically it starts rotting right away, basically.
Yeah, I mean, once you harvest it, certain enzymes are produced and it just starts deteriorating. It's like you're just going to lose nutritional value. That's why a lot of farmers will say, when's the best time to eat corn? So as soon as you pick it off, eat it, cook it and eat it. That's the best time.
And you're also picking earlier than you need to, right? Because you're trying to, have some of the
Yes.
produce ripen as it in transit.
Exactly. Right now, and the reason I got interested in all this was my wife was diagnosed with celiac disease, and obviously I was a scientist before then. All of a sudden, I have to learn about food and nutrition. And I'm like, what's going on? And this is all new to me. But I met with some folks at MD Anderson at Baylor College of Medicine, and they're sort of giving me an education on how widespread some of these issues are and how they always seem to trace back to nutrition and proper nutrition or lack of proper nutrition. But yeah, the vegetables and fruit, definitely much better. The current food industry is built for distribution. It's not built for consumption. So I've been to some of those gas chambers where they actually bring in tomatoes and strawberries and all bananas and all kinds of other things, and they literally roll them on pallets into these gas chambers and gas them for 24 hours so they look pretty, and then they can take them to the grocery store. So you're not going to have the full nutrition.
Well, and so much of the produce, is exactly designed for that transportation piece, fruit that doesn't bruise, or,
Exactly.
There's all kinds of fruits that are just not convenient. So many watermelon varieties that are out there that don't fit in your refrigerator. And so you end up with, very round, small watermelons or something, but you're missing out on all kinds of other ones.
Or tomatoes that are rubber balls. They transport great, but they taste terrible. Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, I know the importance of proactive legal advice. Hunton Andrews Kurth has been a leader for over 120 years, offering top-notch support in energy, finance, real estate, and retail. They handle problems like their own. Hunton Andrews Kurth, they get it done. Well, how does hydroponics work exactly? I mean, I have a kind of a guess that it involves a lot of water, but it sounds like it doesn't.
It involves very, very little water. Hydroponics literally means to work with water. And this is something that I was introduced to back in the early 90s when I was an intern at Stennis Space Center. And they were looking at bioregenerative life support. But there's various forms of hydroponics, but typically it's a closed loop system. And typically you water the roots of the plants. So it's not top watering, there's no evaporation. And we like nutrient film technique and other things, but you get the water, you make sure it has the right pH, it has the right nutrients, it has the right amount of oxygen, and you feed it to the plants. And you keep it in a closed loop system. When you do that, the plants usually are really healthy, very much less stressed. And more importantly, you have zero agricultural water runoff. There's zero ag runoff. You use 90% less water because you're not wasting anything. The plants can be grown year round, so it's always in season. So, and you can grow a huge variety of crops that way. So.
And it's all indoors and in greenhouses?
You can do it outdoors. I've seen farms where they use hoop houses and the tables are elevated and they're doing it outdoors. It works beautifully. I've seen those in Australia and in Africa. But typically it's in a greenhouse or in some sort of a warehouse. Warehouses are very expensive. Greenhouses are a lot easier, and usually the more profitable models are based on greenhouse with really good climate control.
What about fertilization? And I know you mentioned runoff. I mean, that's been a pollution issue and all that, nitrates and everything.
Zero ag runoff. You don't discharge anything. Everything is pretty much closed loop, and you top off with city water or well water or whatever your water source is. But it's very, very efficient. The other thing too is you'll use a fraction of the fertilizer. And you can use synthetic fertilizers, you can use mineral-based fertilizers, or even organic fertilizers. There's some pros and cons with every one. But you can grow anything year-round. And with the population growth, especially in cities, it doesn't make sense that every year it's 1,700 miles away from your food, and 2,000 miles away from your food. And even with climate change and access to water, I think that's where the future will be in, is hydroponics.
And it also solves food waste issues as well?
Yeah, I mean, for example, 15 to 20% of the food waste could be due to transportation. Well, you don't need to transport if you're right here. A lot of it is spoilage. Well, if it's fresh and you harvest and you're delivering directly to you don't have that spoilage. You can't do much about people when they put it in the refrigerator, but you can make sure that it lasts longer. I'll give you an example. We sell lettuce, and some of our customers are like, wow, it's been 3 weeks. It still looks great, and it's in my fridge. If I bought it from a supermarket, after a week, it starts to look terrible. Or wow, we got these herbs, and 2 or 3 weeks later, they still look great. But, supermarket, you get a little blister pack, it looks terrible after 2 or 3 days.
Why is that?
Part of it is it's grown in soil, and there's usually fungal issues or bacterial issues, and it could be packaging or storage or transportation by the time it gets there. And it's probably just starting to die off because it was harvested.
Do they ship with the roots? I've seen some of that where they package things with the roots. And
those are better. They usually have a higher nutritional value, and they last longer. So those are actually like living lettuce or living crops. Those are definitely going to be better for you.
Is that something that is it as far as the plant is concerned? Its roots were already kind of exposed and in the water, and now it's in a bag and it's happier or something.
Typically, when you see that, it was grown in a hydroponic facility.
It was, okay.
Yeah, you usually don't see that on regular. Usually, if it's in the ground, they're cutting it and harvesting it really quick. But if it's hydroponic, they can just pull it out and take it out.
So how does NASA actually influence your innovation at Moonflower then? That's kind of quite the leap. I see there's a lot of problems down here to solve with this, but okay, we're going to grow stuff on the moon. Yeah,
it's sort of ironic. Like I said, in 2015, I got a call from my buddies at NASA, and they're like, hey, you still doing hydroponics? Yeah, I'm going to get into it. And they're like, well, maybe you can help us put flowers on the moon. And that's how we got our name, Moonflower. In 2015, when NASA said, hey, we're going to go back to the moon, we have a space program that's going to become active again. My NASA buddies said, hey, we really need to look at hydroponics because we can't ship food. It's way too expensive to ship water and food back into space. We need bioregenerative systems. And all of our experts in bioregenerative systems are either dead or retired. And fortunately, I had worked under a lot of those experts in those systems. So that's why they're looking at this now. You need to have bioregenerative systems, essentially systems that have plants that can clean the air constantly, that can clean the water constantly, and they can grow food in space. So that's going to be these habitats, your life support systems are going to be bioregenerative. You're going to need a botanist. You're going to need a lot of botanists.
So I've seen the story of the guy. He's got this huge terrarium, and he put the plants and everything in there, and he sealed it up. And 50 years later, it's still all growing. Is that the idea?
Yeah. In this particular case, especially the model that was first, the NASA BioHome model that was started in the early 90s. It was a building that was designed to house 4 astronauts on the moon. It was like a lunar module that kept those astronauts alive. But it was surrounded on the perimeter by plants. So you had a kitchen, you had a bathroom, you had showers, you had facilities and sleeping quarters, but it was completely surrounded by plants. First stage, it would clean a lot of that really dark water. Second stage, it got cleaner, and that's where they did more of the air purification. Third stage is where they were doing food production, because now you're getting cleaner and cleaner water. Last stage, you're doing other food production, but then eventually all the water and even a dehumidifier, because you have to keep the levels at a certain point, all go into a central tank. And there they would UV treat it and filter, and it went back to a fresh water tank. So that whole closed loop system was designed, and I was captivated by that. I said, wow, this is amazing. And the Biosphere 2 project that was done in Arizona was something that was trying to emulate that, but on a much bigger scale. But that's what they want to do on the moon and Mars, is we need to have self-sustaining systems. They have to be bioregenerative. We have to produce a lot of food, certain caloric content. Nutrition is incredibly important. You're missing out on vitamin C, you get scurvy. But if you're missing on vitamin D or something else, you can have other health-related issues. So they have to be able to grow those crops in space.
So it's really core part of having people live on the moon. It's not just about growing food or flowers or whatever.
It's your life support system.
Interesting.
So it's like the hard part is getting there. But once you get there, how do you stay alive? Well, you need life support systems, and that will be a bioregenerative system.
I've seen some of that on the sci-fi show. I know you're a Star Trek fan.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anybody that's getting that right? Have you seen any sci-fi that is close to?
There's a lot of different companies, and by the way, we're consulting for one of them, and we've been asked to consult for another one over at Biosphere 2. So we're in some discussions on that. There's a lot of space analogs out there that are being built. Some of them are looking at air cleaning. Some of them are looking at food production. Some of them are looking at water treatment. Kind of
taking what would have to be done on the moon, but doing it down here.
Exactly. And it's like, okay, we have a little analog, and we're simulating 4 astronauts living in there. How much waste is going to be produced? How quickly can we clean it? How big does it have to be? Is it self-sustaining? Is it self-cleaning? So they're doing a lot of that. So there's probably about 10 or 12 major projects worldwide. The most interesting one that I've seen so far is in China. I'll make a prediction. China will be the first colony on the moon.
Why do you think that?
They're so far ahead as far as bioregenerative life support systems, and they're taking a serious effort at colonizing the moon. I've seen some of them.
Because they've never even gone there yet, right?
No, they've been there. Yeah, they've already grown plants on the moon.
Oh, they have?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So they're already on the dark side of the moon right now.
And I had not heard that, actually.
Yeah. Most people have not heard a lot of this.
Why would they go to the dark side if you're going to grow plants, though?
Oh, well, I mean, they're just looking at establishing a colony somewhere, and I have a feeling a lot of it is based on, hey, where can we find some really attractive rare earth metals to have an economically sustainable, viable project that is worthwhile before we actually start putting colonies on there. But they have a very interesting program, and even Japan has an interesting program. But there are several out, Germany, European Union. But the Chinese, from what I'm seeing, their tech looks really good, but not great. I've seen some holes in it, and I'm like, all right. We're talking to NASA here in Houston and to Space Alliance Technical Outreach in Houston about trying to build an analog here in Houston that would be a little bit more advanced. But, we got to see where that goes.
Well, what are some projects you are working on that you could maybe talk a little bit about?
Well, right now on the real world and planet Earth, we have a couple of big projects. One of them is we're working with a lot of universities and schools as they start looking at putting hydroponic systems in classrooms. Part of it is to teach students about nutrition and about how to grow their own food. Right now in the United States, about 72% of all of our fruits and vegetables are imported, and that seems to be growing, so that's a big issue. I think the average farmer is 68. Not a lot of new farmers coming up, so it's a big problem. And more schools are wanting to teach, not FFA, but teach nutrition and how to grow your own crops and the importance of food. So we're helping them by putting these hydroponic systems into the schools.
Do you think it's going to go from, we kind of have this ebb and flow, or even on like computers and mainframes, back to desktops,
yes,
back to the cloud, back to local, and like farming, of course, is big ag. Do you think that's going to have a similar thing, like a hydroponics on every desk or something like the computer thing, like Bill Gates said?
You're 100% correct. It solves so many problems. Hydroponic, 0 pesticides. Conventional, 80% of everything you buy has pesticides. Hydroponic, a fraction of the water. Conventional, 10 times more water. Land use. It just solves so many problems. If I were to make a prediction, I'd say by the end of this decade, every major city in the world is going to be surrounding themselves, either inside the city or outside of the city, with hydroponic farms. It just solves too many problems. Climate tech issues,
land
issues, water issues. That's where the people are. Probably need to have food there. It just solves too many problems. The other prediction that I will make, and it's more in computer, is as you start training these young minds, and the analogy I like to use is when the computer industry first started, in 1980, if you went to a school and you went to a principal and said, hey, principal, how many personal computers you got? And the principal would say, what's a personal computer? But in 1985, you talk to the same principal and said, oh my God, we have hundreds of personal computers. We need hundreds more. One day, I think every student is going to have their own personal computer. Maybe one day. I think that this year is 1980 for hydroponics. I think by 2030, every kid is going to be trained in high school, middle school on hydroponics and the importance of hydroponics and food and nutrition. It just has so many health benefits, IQ benefits, emotional benefits, on and on and on. So they need to learn the technology. In addition, once they get to know these systems, some of them are going to say, hey, wait a second. When I go to the grocery store, how come they only have one type of basil? In the real world, there's thousands of kinds of basil. How come I don't get cinnamon basil or chocolate basil or orange basil or Thai basil or opal basil or all these other basils out there? And they're going to start using these systems to program their own basil. And now all of a sudden, you're going to see a variety of crops, an explosion of varieties that most people don't see. And they're not genetically modified. They exist in the real world. So my challenge to some of them, when that gets to be there, is like, hey, in the real world, they have hundreds, thousands of different kinds of strawberries. There's going to be a high school hacker using hopefully our system, hopefully our platform, saying, wow, there's some natural varieties of yellow, orange, and white strawberries that are in Iran, and we're going to play around with some of them, and we're going to come up with a golden strawberry that has a brick sugar level of 12 and above that's naturally antifungal and will store for 4 weeks without damage. And they're going to grow them in our system. And when they do, I will invest in that company.
Yeah.
Because now they are food programmers.
Well, but why is it hard? I mean, so you put a plant in there and put some water on it, and who cares, right? You talked about your epiphany that you had in the first time with Bear, but I mean, what's involved in hydroponics that makes it difficult?
Well, right now it's overly complex. Once again, like the computer industry, when it first began, it's like, okay, well, here's my motherboard, and I got these special fans, and I got to program this, and I got to tie in this equipment, and peripherals are a pain, and you got to combine all this stuff. It's a patchwork quilt, and some engineers love the challenge, but the average person does not. And like Apple Computer is like, it's a toy computer. A kid can be running it in 10 minutes. What's going on? Well, that user interface was much, much simpler. So even today, I go to schools and they're saying, oh my God, we called the greenhouse company and they'll say, yeah, here's the greenhouse. And we'll say, well, this is what we want to grow. Oh, we don't do the growing systems. You got to call the growing systems. Which one do you want? Aquaponic, aeroponic, hydroponic, NFT, flood and drain. It's confusing. And it says, okay, well, these are the systems. We just want to grow carrots or tomatoes or something. Oh, well, if you need that, you also need the sensors and you need the hardware and you need the software. We don't do that. You need to outsource that. So it's a patchwork quilt. You got to put all these pieces together, and it's complicated. Oh, I need to hire a consultant now. And this consultant is really great at this systems, but they don't know all these other systems. And then you get something that doesn't quite work the way you expected it.
So you're pulling that all together and making it work.
If I have a high school student that can set up and in one day be growing something, and in 3 weeks show off what he's growing, I've succeeded. Because it's like, I can do this here. I can do this anywhere. I can put in lettuce, tomato, basil, and I can be in the North Pole, or I can be in China, I could be on the moon, and it's going to grow that because I know exactly what to do, and the system is automatically optimized for that crop. So that's what I'm working with them. When they tell me that, oh, this is so simple, we can use this anywhere, then I know that we're there.
Well, what would you say to someone who would tell you that, well, this isn't really a priority?
There's the old adage, you are what you eat. And I would challenge them to read up Tufts University or the Oxford University Press. And they talk about a $1.4 trillion a year problem that we have in the US called food nutrition. And some of the health issues that we're having because of poor food nutrition. And obviously there's certain trends that are occurring now with the distance between the food and the farm, the processed foods that we're eating, pesticides, and
what about plastics? I mean, you don't
microplastics everywhere. I mean, all these things are lack of water. After a while, the nutrition is incredibly important. I mean, some people don't remember millions of people died from scurvy. It wasn't just sailors. Millions of people died from scurvy. Vitamin C, that one little nutrient that you needed, that was important. Millions of people died. So nutrition is incredibly important if you want. When I talk to top athletes, they said it's not a training regimen that I begin with. I begin with a nutrition regimen. Whether it's an Olympic athlete or a top athlete, it's like, first I start with nutrition. When I got that down, then I look at the training regimen.
Interesting.
And I think, and same thing with the NASA guy. Astronauts, here's our nutrition regimen. Okay, great. Now let's talk about education and training and planning. And it's incredibly important, but it's pretty much taken for granted.
At SoftTech, we don't just follow the trends, we set them. As the founder and CEO, I've built a team that excels in delivering cutting-edge solutions in software, hardware, and IoT. From concept to completion, we're the partner that turns your tech dreams into reality. SoftTech, where innovation starts. Well, we have a lot of startups that listen to Forging the Future, and you're working with NASA. But if I'm a startup and I want to work with NASA, do you have any pointers or tips for, you just have to know a guy, or how does that work?
No. There's actually in Houston in particular with Bay Area Economic Council, the Development Council, they have a not-for-profit group called SATOP, Space Alliance Technical Outreach Program. And you can reach out to SATOP and schedule a meeting, go meet with them and tell them what your challenges are, tell them what you're working on. They have a lot of NASA engineers and scientists that are saying, hey, this looks interesting. I'm willing to donate time and effort to helping look at this problem a little bit more.
Does it have to be space related?
Not really. You can go to them with an engineering problem or something else. But if they have a pool of talent there and they might say, hey, I'm happy to help. This looks very interesting. So it's mostly business related, but obviously if there's an aerospace angle, they kind of lean that way, but it's not necessary.
I think you mentioned this earlier, that some people don't realize that there are, maybe their application does have something that would solve a problem for space, right? And they just don't know it.
That's correct. And sometimes they'll look at what you have and it's like, wow, hey, if they're using this for this water issue, that could definitely have an impact over here. Or, hey, they came up with something very interesting that has very little energy requirements, low power requirements. They're always interested in low power requirements for different things. So that would be another aspect of it. In my particular case, they're definitely looking at bioregenerative life support systems and design, and also food production in space. Very, very important. Even the Mars Society, I think they just announced one of their key priorities is food production, because it's so important. And it's not just food production, it's the right kind of food that provides the right nutrition in a massive scale in a space environment.
Well, I normally ask at the end, how are you forging the future? But I think the whole conversation has been about that. So what's next for you on your journey and the global impact of Moonflower?
What we're trying to do right now is establish the first hyperlocal grow network in Houston, probably the first one in the world. But we want to do it in Houston first. I mean, NASA's here, schools are here, medical centers here, tons of interns, But we just want to have a model that we can showcase that works. And it begins with education. And so we're working with high schools and universities to say, wow, this is a really easy to use platform. And we need one of these growing systems, and now we have 10 of them, and the students are really liking this. What else can you do? But that sort of gets it started. We're also working with the universities to provide the training and certification. Schools want to make sure that it's not just training, but they can actually be certified to different levels.
Of what? What certification?
For example, they might be certified to actually work in a controlled environment agricultural facility. Or this could be just basic hydroponics knowledge. Or now it's like, oh, now I know more sophisticated engineering aspects of that CEA and hydroponics. Or now I'm actually operating a facility. So with this network that we're looking at, we've been in contact with several churches, schools, universities, retirement communities, wellness communities. I think in the future they're going to want this amenity, because one of the big problems they came to us during COVID in 2022 is like, wow, we built this huge community garden, and then the freeze came and it wiped it all out. So we rebuilt it, and then the next year the drought came and it wiped it all out, and then we rebuilt it, and then the next year came and the hurricane came and it wiped it all out, and then this year came and another freeze hit and it wiped it all out. You can't do it outdoors. It's not, you can do it, it might look pretty. Something's going to wipe it all out. So they're saying, can you build something that is self-sustaining, that can handle the hurricanes and the freezes? Well, we know we can. So that will be part of their new community. That's how we build the network. It'll be a node on the network, but we just want to make it very, very easy. And at the same time, those students that we're training and certifying will say, okay, the last part of your training is to go, you're going to live at that church for 6 months, you're going to work there to get your final certification. And then they're ready to go. And hopefully from there, they're going to, this is very good. I want to have a business doing this. I'm going to come up with the golden strawberry. I'm going to come up with the medicinal herb that tackles high blood pressure. The new version of lion's mane mushroom that makes dementia go away. It will be based on nutrition, but now they'll have the tools to do that, and that should spread the network.
How long do you think this hyper network will take to build in Houston?
Less than 3 years.
3 years? Okay.
My goal is to, once we set up that main training facility and we are optimizing the technology, we're talking to several groups next year about building these first smart greenhouses in Houston. We have 3 different locations. Obviously, we need the first one so we get all the kinks out. But our other systems are already in place, and we're getting really good feedback. But IoT and software takes time, but eventually, as they're operational, we're going to get the kinks out and say, yeah, this platform is working well, this network is growing well, and it's starting to expand in Houston. Because every major city has the same problems. So if we can solve the problems here, we can pretty much solve them anywhere.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's what we're focused on.
We've come a long way from my parents having greenhouses and plants and growing vegetables and then having plant parties and things like that. But I'm excited to see this come together.
And the beauty is, if you can still farm in your backyard, I mean, you can still till the soil and do it. That's all good. I mean,
then you got gophers and everything else to deal with.
But don't be surprised if there's a hailstorm or a freeze or a flood or a drought or something that wipes it all out.
I keep putting like palm trees in my yard, and then every 1, 2, 3 years, it's like they just freeze them out again. And it's like, well, okay, why bother? I don't want to put plants in my yard that won't survive, but the climate has changed some. So
it's a little more extreme weather, and that was our eureka moment, because we were focusing on something a little bit different in our model. You never know in a business. You sort of have to pivot. So in 2022, when we had every churches and retirement communities and developers and schools, they're all asking for the exact same thing. We're like, maybe we should listen to them. Okay, what do you need? Okay, and they seem to overlap. Okay, this is the solution we're going to provide.
Why are schools and churches asking for this?
With COVID in particular, all of a sudden they were giving little Lunchables for lunch. It's like, wait a second, there's no nutrition. And even the nutritionists were like, and the dietitian was like, you can't give kids junk food. But that's all they had. The huge supply chain issue. So they're like, we need to do, I was surprised too, when they came to me and said, oh, hey, this hydroponic growing system, this curriculum stuff, that's all cool. No, we need a greenhouse. We need to produce like 1,000 a day. I'm like, really? 1,000? Yeah, we're feeding 50,000 schools in our school the kids in our school district. So I was a little bit taken aback by that. And I said, okay, they need something that's simple, something that's reliable, something that they don't necessarily have to manage but could. So that's what sort of shifted our focus. Churches the same way. A lot of the churches said, hey, We want to build something that in our community that our members want. They like to garden. Our master garden gets wiped out every year. We're tired of spending $50,000, $100,000 a year on having to redo it. Can you give us something that will be more sustainable, a lot more resilient, and is easy to learn? Yes, we can. So that's what we've been working on. So that was the eureka moment. The other thing too, by the way, they all had the same requirement. Make it look sexy. We don't want a greenhouse. We want it to look sexy. Good curbside appeal. So it's like, okay, only hire an architect. We need to make it look good. And then the churches in particular and some of the other ones, like, we need something that will attract young people. And young people want to make an impact. Mm-hmm. This allows them to make an impact.
That's great. Yeah. That's very interesting. Well, I think design aspects, and that's another page out of Apple's book, right? But I mean, you look at the spacesuits that the SpaceX astronauts. Oh, yeah. I mean, they purposely hired a designer because, like, there's no reason why the spacesuits have to look ugly.
That's right.
And same thing with Elon on the electric car, right? I mean, there was an ugly tax to driving an EV or something because you're driving a Prius or whatever, and it looks like, who wants to drive that thing? It's like, that's not cool. Let's create cool cars that are also EVs, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, greenhouse and then hydroponics, I mean, it might as well look good.
Absolutely. I mean, it's something that they can be proud of. Hey, look what I grew, and look at this cool system, and I know how to use every function on the app, and look at my chart and my data, but meanwhile, look at the product. Wow. And I was able to modulate the light frequencies and come up with purple lettuce instead of, green lettuce.
Maybe I would have been more interested in that than having to go out there and weed my dad's garden.
Yeah, exactly. So for them, they get a big kick out of that. Mm-hmm. But now they're producing like hundreds a week and maybe thousands a week out of the systems that are in their school.
Interesting.
But even like I said, the churches is something that their younger members are looking for. And talk is one thing, but actually making an impact is something else.
Well, I learned so much, and I'm excited about what you're doing and building, and I'm definitely going to be following it. It's not something that's been on my radar. Yeah. I'm a space geek. I got my moon socks on today. That's cool. So my astronaut socks. Yeah. And I have something for you.
Oh,
thanks
gifts.
For this.
All right.
It's I think something related. It's organisms on the moon. So
life on the moon.
Yeah, there you go.
I love it.
Well, thanks for coming on the show today, Federico. Super interesting stuff.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. I know how important staying informed is for innovation and growth. The Forging the Future newsletter brings you the best in tech trends, startup advice, and industry insights. Join our community and forge your future with us. Subscribe now.